Hi, this is Steve Millard with the Greater Akron Chamber. Welcome to Advocacy in Action. Advocacy in Action is our new podcast where we take on a number of the issues that we're talking about in the State House, at the federal Capitol, and other places. We talk to policymakers, decision makers, key leaders who are really shaping the environment in which we all do business in the broader Akron-Canton region. This podcast will be hosted by John Rizzo and periodically by Jeff Dafler of the Canton Regional Chamber and myself. But really, we're looking forward to bringing these interesting conversations to you. And in this first episode, John, Jeff, and I talk a little about the establishment of the Akron-Canton Advocacy Alliance, some of the work that we've done over the past year, and what we see ahead. We hope you enjoy this podcast and look forward to bringing to you the very best in thinking about policy, opportunity, and the environment we do business in Akron-Canton. Before we dive into that, though, a little bit, let's just start. Jeff, talk a little about your background. You're recently in the role, maybe a year or so ago.
That's right.
At the Canton Chamber, but talk about what you did before that, because I think you got a really fascinating background, especially for advocacy.
I'll try not to disappoint them and make it interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I've been president and CEO of the Canton Regional Chamber for a year now. And before that, I was vice president of economic development and public policy at the chamber. And I've got really a whole career in advocacy, policy, and some communication work mixed in. But I started way back as a U.S. diplomat. I worked in embassies and consulates and kind of did this kind of work in other countries, which was a lot of fun. You're the
first international diplomat I've ever had on this podcast. So I'm really excited about that, Jeff.
What an honor. But they finally let me do this kind of work in the United States as well. So I had to work out all the bugs in other countries.
Sure.
And before coming to the chamber, I did my own consulting business for about 2.5 years, doing this kind of work, and had been vice president of government affairs at the Timken Company.
Okay.
A big Akron-Canton region employer for a number of years before that.
Awesome. So you bring a lot to the game. I've watched you as you've interacted with elected officials, as you hosted conversations. I can tell you love it, and you're good at it, and it really runs in your blood.
Well, it's a heck of a lot easier to be good at the things you love.
Right. Sure.
So that helps. But yeah, it's great. And quite frankly, across all those years, I hate to even admit this, but the truth is John Rizzo is one of the best professionals in the field that I've had the pleasure of working with. So that is a great and shameless transition. John, tell folks a little bit about where you've been in this space and the work that you've been doing.
Setting the bar a little high there.
Yeah.
I've been with the Greater Akron Chamber for the better part of 10 years now. I've been associated with the chamber dating back to 2013, where I first started as an intern, stayed on as an extended paid intern, went to grad school. And then when I had started law school, I came back to the chamber and really began a career after about a year being back at the chamber in 2017 and haven't left. So I stuck around like a bad habit. And with the launch of the Alliance, it's really just brought a whole new exciting spin to my work in advocacy. The work hasn't changed too much in and of itself, but there's a lot more opportunity through a regional platform like this.
So let's talk about that for a second. As we thought about the Alliance and we talked about the opportunity, maybe Jeff, talk about what you hoped we'd accomplish and why you thought this was a good idea when we went down the path.
Well, I think when we first talked about it, back even before I started in this role officially, I think we saw an opportunity here to do something concrete on a regional level. And advocacy work clearly was an area where it made a lot of sense to pool our efforts. And in part, that's because we've worked so closely together over the past several years in this area. We've got very similar policy priorities. If you look at the Canton and Akron communities, we work with a lot of the same public officials. We're in the same rooms on the same issues. And this was just an obvious opportunity for us to come together. And quite frankly, I think in my mind, there were really two things that were at the forefront. That was, let's actually build some energy and positivity around that regional experience. So we're getting more interaction and engagement, whether that's our members, whether it's elected officials, whoever it may be. And then additionally, I think it created the opportunity for us to magnify our impact for our members. Yep. Because really we're back before, when I was doing this work, myself on a day-to-day basis for the Canton Regional Chamber, I was representing at the time 1,800, members when I would go in and meet with an elected official. Now it's 1,900, but we put that together. We're actually speaking on behalf of 4,500 businesses in the Akron-Canton region. And I think that makes a huge impact.
Well, it puts a different spin on the work that we do. One of the things so when I first came to this region back in 2018, the very first phone call that I got after the rules announced I was going to take the role was from Denny and Denny Sanya, who is the long-term CEO of the Canton Regional Chamber. And he invited me down to the airport to celebrate, I think on my very first day in the job, the opening of a new route for one of the airlines there. And, this idea, we had long conversations about, look, we're a region that's got a lot of common assets. We're 20 minutes apart or so from the two core cities, but there really is so much more we can represent as a collaboration. And so, you take steps. And we talked a long time about a brand of sort of Akron Canton and how you talk about that a little bit. But to me, this idea of doing some things together is the best way to build that muscle, if you will, to really engage and interact. And so, John, in your role, you've been kind of quarterbacking this effort to sort of work together in advocacy. Talk about some of the wins that we had over the last year as a collaboration, as an alliance.
So just going back real quick to something Jeff mentioned about collaboration, we've had no less than dozens of conversations with folks about the alliance. It's a new brand that's out there and rather active in the community. But the common line that I put out there is the initiative may be new, but the collaboration is not. It's simply us in the Akron-Canton region taking the collaboration that's been going on for many years, predating my time here, to the next level. It's more time effective. It's more efficient for our elected officials and members. So overall, just from the ground level, it made sense to a lot of people. In our first year, we didn't really miss a beat. Just from an operational standpoint, we brought on an additional team member in Alexis Ranieri to help really stand up a lot of the operational and administrative aspects of the alliance. We still maintained our events cadence. We actually were more active than in previous years. We were in DC 6 times, Columbus about double that. And we had over 20 events locally. So there's no shortage of engagement opportunities that we continued to provide people, even with being a relatively new initiative, and we were trying to find our legs along the way.
And when you say 20 events, what are you talking about? I mean, these are opportunities, to just, to have cocktails together, opportunities to engage elected. Talk about the events that the alliance sort of puts on.
Yes.
Yes. So all that. It's cocktails and elected officials.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Right.
When I say we did 20 events, 20 times we brought together elected officials and our members to discuss a variety of issues, whether it's a big grant opportunity, a piece of legislation, a specific regulation that's troublesome that we want to see repealed or delayed. Anytime we're bringing our members together with elected officials around a policy priority we've identified, we're going to consider that an event. And so when we say to people that we've done 20 events, it's to help demonstrate the level of engagement that they could have should they choose to participate.
Now, this alliance was built on the principle that we want to sort of drive synergies between our organizations and our members, et cetera. A lot of our members, again, we're sitting on both our advocacy committees or involved in both of our boards, but also the idea that, look, there are going to be issues that just Akron cares about or that just Canton cares about. And so the alliance really functions as really, you got a couple of bosses, right, John? That you've got to sort of satisfy more than that. Yeah. Yeah. But really both chambers are sort of supporting this activity and leveraging it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that flexibility where, yes, if there's a Canton specific or a Stark County specific issue, say a local tax measure that the Canton Regional Chamber cares about, wants to take a position on, we still have that ability to do that independently. And I think that's the sort of thing that allayed any concerns or fears that might have been there at the beginning. Well, we will lose our ability to act on a local issue, or we don't care what Akron thinks about the Canton City Schools levy, or those sorts of, you can hear those things. Mm-hmm. But I think the way that it has played out has really reassured folks that in a situation where we need that independence, we can still that means that's not saying that we're going to have a major disagreement over a policy issue.
Sure.
It could happen. But I think we have the flexibility to deal with that as well. It's important to emphasize that this is not a merger of the chambers. This is not, ceding authority over decision making, from one chamber to the other.
Right.
The alliance, the Akron-Canton Advocacy Alliance, reviews policy issues, makes recommendations to the boards of each chamber, which then can take action independently on that particular issue. So I think this is one of the kind of the best of both worlds. We get to pool the resources. We get to speak with one voice in the 99% of cases where it makes sense, but we have that flexibility too if we need to do something independently.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, the reaction has been very positive from our businesses, but also from our elected officials, as we said earlier. You think about the work, how hard they have to work sort of every day to keep track of and connect with constituents and businesses and those kinds of things. And in advocacy, that, size and reach and scope all matters. You think about some of the numbers with the Alliance, 1.4 million people in population in the area that we service, which is a nice chunk of Ohio. It makes us very relevant, right? 37,000 businesses and probably, or 37,000 employers, and probably twice as many of that are just sort of more businesses, right? Sole proprietors and things like that. 640,000 jobs, 6 higher education institutions, 62,000 college students, 4,500 combined members. So it really sort of puts us in a different place as we talk about issues in policy.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's the unimagined consequence that is kind of the coolest. We had an event this past Friday where we had our regular Akron-Canton Advocacy Alliance meeting, followed by a reception with elected officials. And in that room, which was at the MAPS Air Museum, cool place.
Very cool venue.
If you haven't visited, I strongly encourage it. But in that room, we had state representatives from Summit County and Stark County, all being able to spend time not just with our members and with us, but with each other. Mm-hmm. And outside of Columbus, they probably don't get that opportunity very often to build those relationships among themselves. And so that's something that we bring to the table that, I hadn't really even thought of myself ahead of time. So,
John, is there an example of something that we did over the last year that probably couldn't have been done as well by just one of the organizations?
Yeah, well, going back to something that Jeff had mentioned about the 99% of the time that we're aligned on issues, and that's why it makes sense to come together. I'd say it's 99.99% of the time.
I agree.
I'd say in my time at the chamber, the Akron and Canton public policy agendas have been largely,
there was that one time you really ticked me off, but other than that,
right.
They've been largely identical. In and of itself, it's been an accomplishment to establish a first ever Akron-Canton Advocacy Alliance joint public policy agenda. So that was a big one that we're excited to continue updating every legislative session. But just in recent years, the Akron-Canton region can hang its hat on some pretty significant wins. We look at things like the two regions coming together. Steve, you already mentioned the Jobs Ohio grant to attract Breeze Airways. That was some years ago. After that, the two regions and our political subdivisions all came together to defeat some really potentially harmful federal policy changes that would alter the way in which MSAs or metropolitan statistical areas are delineated in a way that would essentially erase both the Akron and Canton MSAs. It was the two chambers that really rang the bell and got folks to react to that in a way that resulted in those potentially harmful regulations being defeated. Our two chambers really led the development of the Ohio Innovation Hub program within the last state operating budget. Early conversations originated in this region. Governor DeWine was very receptive to it. Director Mejia was right there along with us, supporting it all the way. And we continue to, we've realized some level of success from that program. We continue to advocate for some additional funding from that for projects in Stark. But also, we were the vehicle through which some really high-level federal grants advocated for themselves, both through the Federal Tech Hubs program and the Federal EDA Recompete Pilot program. So we were, even though we were a very new initiative, we were trusted to be kind of that point person or that point organization, that point group to lead advocacy for some pretty significant grants that were on the table, both of which realized some level of success.
One of the tricks in doing government relations work is making sure that, even though you can count to the majority on your issues, making sure you can get leadership engagement in that work as well is super important. And so as I think about Senate Bill 105 that we kind of led around, reducing the difficulty and the number of forms and the bureaucracy around certifications for women-owned, minority-owned businesses down in Columbus. And really part of that happened because we had a very powerful combination in Senator Vernon Sykes and Senator Kirk Schuring, one from Summit, one from Stark, and the region just kind of working together on something where they both had leverage and influence to get something done. So that ability to have real deep engagement with leaders across a broader geography is important.
Yeah. Senate Bill 105 is maybe the most tangible thing we could point to of the two regions coming together, where the business communities from both, Canton and Akron came up with an idea, and legislators from both Canton and Akron stepped up and, led it through the process. And it passed with nearly unanimous support and became law, and some additional administrative changes that we had recommended in the first place that weren't included within that legislation were just made through regular rulemaking processes within the state. And those all took effect last summer. So about June of 24. So very good.
And again, I'd say that's a perfect example of an entity kind of like innovation hubs, where our collaboration here in the Akron-Canton region really made a positive impact across the entire state. Yep. Because if you look at what happened with what they call, I think, certification reciprocities, kind of the policy term for it, with the minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses, that benefits every corner of Ohio. Right. And that happened right here because of the collaboration between the two chambers, our collaboration with our respective minority-owned, minority business entities, as well as those two senators. And sadly, we lost Senator Kirk Schuring late last year. But that was just an example of what Senator Sykes and Senator Schuring have valued throughout their careers, and that's working across the aisle to get good things done.
Yep. No, we need more and more of that for us to be effective in the areas of policy. So, one of the things that the Alliance relies on, we've got staff, we've got reach, we've got population, we've got elected officials, but we need business leaders to be engaged as well, right? Because none of this happens without them. As membership organizations, we're here for the common self-enlightened interest of our members, right? It's about them. It's about getting done what they need to get done. So, when we put these meetings together and we have these conversations, we've got a wide range of industries and people and companies represented. Talk a little about the composition of that group, John, and sort of what we are trying to do in 2025 to sort of increase it even more.
So as it stands, we have about 50 engaged folks on our roster from a broad set of industries. Our goal is to have that roster reflect the industry diversity of both chambers of commerce. And so Alexis and I have been taking a pretty hard look at that over the last couple of months. And we're going to be doing some targeted recruiting efforts to make progress in certain areas where we know we'd like to see more participation, like small business, manufacturing, some key industries like that we know to be largely representative of both chamber membership bases.
So, and I think the important piece here is we've got 50 individuals who are representing companies in our organizations at the table, talking about what the policy issues and positions should be, getting involved with us in dialogue with elected officials on those issues, going to Columbus, going to DC, helping us with that work. But I think the opportunity for folks who have an interest in policy is you can help us set that agenda, right? You can be one of those 50, 60, 70 or more folks on behalf of the 4,500 members, and really on behalf of the 60,000 or 35,000 businesses and employers in the region, to sort of help, drive our voice.
100%. And one thing I mentioned earlier, that we've had plenty of conversations with folks in the first year, just about the Alliance in general, what it is, but how to engage. And one thing we often tell people is you don't have to be a policy expert to participate in the Alliance. We have folks that participate for a wide variety of reasons. Sure, there's people like me whose day-to-day is government affairs, and they have a specific set of issues that they see the Alliance a vehicle through which they can advance them. There's people who are busy running a small business, but whose perspective are very valuable to our advocacy on their behalf. And there's others who are there to learn. They want to get more engaged, but maybe they just haven't had the opportunity. So really, we have folks at all experience levels engaged in the Alliance, and they all bring different types of value to what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think for a small business owner, if you're a small business owner out there and you've got concerns, you've got an issue that's important to you, this doesn't have to take tons of your time. This is not a heavy lift as far as either the amount you have to invest in developing broad expertise in the policy sense, even we're talking about, what are we meeting bi-monthly now as an alliance? You can
once every 2 months.
Yeah.
Right. Not twice a month. I just want to make sure people understand, because, bi, semi, all those things. I just want to make sure we're clear.
I get confused on that sometimes myself, but
I want to make sure people understand it's a light lift, not a heavy lift, right? Yeah, right.
Every other day we're going to get together. But seriously, and you can have an impact because your voice gets heard. It gets reflected in the policy positions we take to Columbus, we take to Washington, and ultimately you're getting the kind of support that typically only the big companies get when they've got in-house government affairs counsel. So I would encourage you to look at the Akron Canton Advocacy Alliance. If you're a small business, this is your in-house government affairs counsel.
And it's not inconsistent with, one of the things that we try to do as chambers of commerce, right? We represent companies all across the spectrum. It's not true that everybody in a chamber is on one side of the issues or the other. Most of our members reside firmly in the middle, where they've got a combination of pressures on them, where their policy, positions aren't so clear and so discrete as to be all one way or all the other way. But I think one of the things that I believe that lobbying and advocacy is all about is about storytelling, right? And I say this often that, I've never met an elected official who wants to do the wrong thing, but I met plenty that doesn't know what the right thing to do is. And it's because they don't have information about the topic. Think about our elected officials and the range of things that they have to cover, the things they have to know about, the kinds of things that are moving through, legislation every year. So they can't be an expert on everything. And their staff are relatively young in a lot of cases too, and also trying to keep up. So our job, I think, as business leaders and business owners and people who are experiencing what regulation does to us, what policy does to us, is to share those stories so they have them and they can grab onto them as they're arguing for us or they're thinking about an issue. And it's so important to get those stories in front of our elected officials.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, it's that story that comes from, someone's district or an elected official's district that really moves the needle on how they're going to come down on a particular issue. And it's sort of like the old adage around why voting is so important. You could be the one vote that makes the difference. Your story could be the one story that puts someone's decision on how to vote on a piece of legislation over the edge. So
never in our lives, I think, have the margins been so tight on so many issues and so many perspectives. And so, the voice does matter. So John, as we think about 2025 and we look ahead, we've got a really busy, at least first and second quarter, I think a really busy 2025 lined up. Talk about some of the things that are coming up that folks might want to get involved with, check out, attend, et cetera.
Yeah. So there's a couple really significant political processes that are going to begin here. The state operating budget at the state level. That's the primary vehicle through which the state funds itself, its agencies, its operations, but there's also a lot of policy that goes into that. So that's going to be something we're paying very close attention to at the federal level. There's a number of key issues that we expect will be part of some kind of tax legislation. Certainly parts of many conversations towards the end of last year regarding the business income deduction, repealing harmful R&D, amortization provisions, the Corporate Transparency Act. These are all things that our members have been active on alongside us and our national partners and speaking out against. Just in the first 2 quarters, we're going to have a couple events down in Columbus, a couple events here locally and in Washington, D.C., where folks can meet directly with state and federal officials, key stakeholders, government representatives that all have some level of influence over the process, both at the state and federal level, where we're strongly looking for people to get more engaged. We have the alliance, and that's fantastic. But these events, they provide a much broader platform through which people could engage directly in these conversations themselves.
So let's talk about a couple specifically, because I think part of this is I want to make sure people understand the real opportunity to get engaged. So we've got a ACAA day in Columbus. What should people expect for that day? I know you don't have all your speakers lined up and everything yet, but talk about the nature of the experience.
Yeah, so the ACAA day in Columbus is going to be a day where we're bringing in state legislators, either in leadership or in serving in key committees in both the House and Senate. We're going to be bringing in administration officials. We have a few department directors that are very relevant to the state operating budget, prime to speak. We have that registration link up on the website, but that's going to be an event where we're hoping to see, anywhere between 60 and 70 of our closest allies on policy issues down in Columbus with us speaking directly to key decision makers. At the end of February, we also have a regional Akron Canton Impact Ohio conference. And at that, we have 3 statewide lined up to speak. We have the House and Senate Finance Committee chairs who by then will have an understanding of the legislation they're working with to create the state operating budget. So we have some of the most relevant people to that key process coming into our region to speak directly to us and take our questions. The first week of March, we have a fly-in to Washington, D.C., where we bring a group of our members from both chambers. We take meetings on Capitol Hill. We attend, different networking events with government staff. Again, all of these are really good opportunities to get in front of people from outside of the region, make connections, and advocate for our policy priorities.
Just one other thing I want to make sure we highlight, because we talked about small business earlier. There's also an opportunity for folks who want to talk about small business policy at a federal level. I think that's coming up also in February, right?
Correct. Yeah, the National Small Business Association has its biannual, so every other year, Small Business Congress. And that's really—
Isn't that biennial? I'm not sure what that is.
Well,
we'll figure it out. Yeah, go ahead. I guess both work.
We can edit it.
That's an event that they hold at the beginning of each new legislative session.
Okay.
Where the NSBA brings together its members from all across the country to discuss what issues are going to be on the table, how we want to prioritize those issues, and then they actually bring folks in from small business oriented committees in Congress from both the United States House of Representatives and Senate to speak directly to those in attendance. We have these conversations, we ask questions, and at the end of the conference, there is one set agenda that then the NSBA goes back and creates detailed issue briefs on and then shares with all of its members and those who participated. So that really gives us a lot to run on and work directly with them as our national partner throughout the course of the next 2 years, year and a half or so.
So it sounds like great opportunities to get engaged. If folks want to learn more about the Alliance, you mentioned a website. What is the website?
Correct. So it's www.akroncantonadvocacy.org. And on that website, you'll find a repository of all the different advocacy updates that we send out. You'll find our legislative radar, which is an external facing tool that we use just to let people know what legislation we're tracking at the state and federal level. There's links to analyses, ways to engage, testimonies we've provided, letters we've written. There's a broad set of resources, but generally speaking, that website encompasses all things Akron Canton Advocacy Alliance. And
as you said, you don't have to be a policy geek, but you got to be somebody who kind of likes this stuff maybe, or at least sees its value in your business in terms of how it helps you. Jeff, if folks want to be involved in this, not hard, right? I mean, you just got to what?
You just got to say, I want to be involved.
Right.
And you got to let John and Alexis know that you're interested and participate. And it can be, really easy for you to get in, to get involved, to participate with us. And there's no additional cost. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Essentially, your members' dues pay for this service and the ability to join us in these efforts. And again, there's a form you can fill out on the website that John mentioned, akroncantonadvocacy.org. Fill in your information, and John or Alexis will follow up, and we'll whisk you off to Washington, D.C.
Well, I think a great opportunity, I think, for all of us. The partnership, I think, has been really valuable to both organizations, and again, has been well received by both our elected officials and companies in the region. We hope that folks will take an opportunity, get engaged in something different in 2025. There's a lot of stuff on the table. And as they sometimes say, if you're not at the table, you are on the table. So we got to make sure our members and businesses are at the table talking about these issues so that we aren't being the ones experiencing the cuts or the policies that sort of hurt the needs of our businesses. So I really appreciate the work that we're doing together, Jeff. Thank you for the partnership. We've I think greatly benefited from it, and hopefully our members are seeing those benefits as well. Before I let you guys go, though, I got to ask you my question. So I need to get a sense of one of your Akron Canton jams, a place that people may not know about, a place that you want to turn them on to. Could be a venue, could be a place to visit, it could be a unique experience. And I'm going to take the Hall of Fame village and museum off the table for you, Jeff, because it's too easy. I mean, your go-to is always, Canton is an amazing asset for you, and that's amazing, but you got to do something different than that because lots of folks know that story. So,
well, you'd be surprised how many people don't know that story who live in our region. And so I always tend to highlight it, but I'm going to go right back to maps.
Okay.
And the reason I am is because, as I think I mentioned this on Friday, I was born on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base down in the Dayton area. And so being down there, the Air Force Museum, all of that stuff was always part of my life growing up. And to discover maps up here, which I'm telling you is on a really high level. They have, dozens of planes that they've restored.
I think 65 is what I heard.
65 planes that are out there. And they tell the story of the men and women who flew those planes, who serviced those planes, who were part of those incredible acts of sacrifice and service in our nation's history. It's well worth it. They do an incredible job. And it happens to be right in the intersection between Summit and Stark County. So it's easy for everybody to get to.
Yeah, Kim and his team do a great job out there. They've got lots of volunteers who love telling the stories and taking care of the airplanes, et cetera. John, how about you?
Mine's a little bit further northeast, but I'll say for anyone that is a dog lover or likes bicycling, there's a place called Bow Wow Beach right on the Summit Portage County's line.
Oh, nice.
It's a great place to bring your dog. There's a fantastic chunk of the towpath trail right there where it's just a beautiful view. You can see baseball fields, farms, Bow Wow Beach, but it's a really enjoyable 20-mile ride from the heart of downtown Akron into Portage County.
That's 20 miles on your car or on your bike? On your bike. Okay. Your dog can make it all 20 miles at your side.
She doesn't come when I bike it.
Oh, okay. Got it.
She's 14.
So it's really just John Beach at that point. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So those are both great ideas. So as we close up here, I do want to mention we are going to sort of spawn something new as the Akron Canton Advocacy Alliance. So hopefully you've enjoyed the Dreamers, Drivers, and Doers podcast. We'll continue that, of course, but we are going to begin a new series of podcasts called Advocacy in Action. John, I think you're going to probably host a lot of those. Talk about what your plan is there, what you want to accomplish with that.
So the idea here is to bring to a broader audience the conversations that we have with elected officials and key government decision makers on a regular basis. We have, again, as we've discussed, no shortage of events and engagement opportunities. So the idea is going to be, again, to bring some of that content to a much broader audience for folks that maybe either didn't get to attend the event for one reason or another, or wanted to kind of revisit something that was discussed at one of the events. So we're going to be putting those out likely on a monthly basis as part of our regular advocacy updates. And again, we'll be housing those on a dedicated YouTube channel for the Alliance itself, but also on the Alliance's website.
Outstanding. We're looking forward to that and some of the stories that you can bring to us and the people who are making the decisions in our region that you can sort of help give them a little information and help them inform us a little bit more. So thank you for that. Jeff, thanks again for the partnership. We appreciate it. And
thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this. And I'm really grateful that you extended the hand and we were able to make this happen.
Well, I appreciate you, Jeff. And I appreciate the time you guys spent today.